Good afternoon. As people are joining, please introduce, we'll get started in just a minute. Please introduce yourselves in the chat as you're starting, as people are entering. So welcome to CSR Marketplace Virtual 2025. In this particular session, which is Harnessing AI for Social Impact, Engaging in Impactful AI Dialogue, sponsored by Blackbaud. My name is Jean Metzger. I'm the Vice President of Membership Marketing and Communications here at ACCP, and I'm so glad that you joined us today. Today's session is one of 9 that we're doing this week as part of CSR Marketplace Virtual. You'll see the full schedule on your screen. Registration for these sessions will remain open this week. We encourage you to register for the remaining sessions. They are all being recorded, and the recordings will be posted on our website next week, and they will be available through the end of the year. Before we get started with today's session, I would like to highlight a couple of upcoming ACCP programs. Our next members-only topical peer discussion will be on signature partnerships, and that will be held on July 10th at 2 p.m. Eastern. We will be releasing our CSR Insights survey results in partnership with Blackbaud on July 17th. So we hope you'll tune in for that presentation to hear about the latest trends in this industry. Our monthly membership webinar will also be on July 17th. We hope you will tune into our State of the Association meeting on August 19th. It's a great opportunity to hear about everything that's going on with ACCP and our new CEO's vision for the future, Andrea Wood. And we will be celebrating our 20th anniversary in Atlanta on September 15 through 17 at our annual conference. So we do hope you will join us there. And then just a note that the early bird deadline for registration is this coming Friday. So if you plan to come, and we hope you do, please make sure you register by Friday to get the best price. And our educational program calendar will wrap up with our Employee Engagement Virtual Summit on November 12 and 13. We also have been getting out into the community this year. We have a couple local happy hours that are on the schedule. We'll be in Minneapolis on July 30th. We'll be in Boston on September 25th. We'll be in New York on October 16th, and we'll be in San Francisco the first week of December. Please keep an eye out for invitations for these fun events. For those members who are looking to learn more about what everything is available to them through ACCP membership, or if you're considering ACCP membership, we do encourage you to visit our membership page. You'll see the QR code on the screen that will take you there and the link. And I will drop my email in the chat. If you have any questions about ACCP, please reach out. Now some Zoom logistics. So we have activated live transcript today. To get to the full transcript, you just click on live transcript and click on the caret. We do encourage you to engage with one another and engage with the panel, with the speakers today through Zoom chat. And we do want to hear your questions. So please drop your questions in the Q&A section. If you see a question that you are also interested in, please click on the thumbs up icon. That way we'll prioritize that question. And we'll be taking questions throughout. So as you think of something, please put it in. And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce our speakers today. Kevin Kirchner, Principal Product Manager at Blackbaud, and Leslie Wickes, Senior Business Intelligence Analyst at Blackbaud. So please, Kevin and Leslie, take it away.
All right, thank you very much. It's good to be here. So I'm Kevin Kirchner. I'm a Principal Product Manager on our Impact Edge product, which is our analytics and AI reporting package for our CSR suite. And go ahead, Leslie.
And I'm Leslie. I am a business intelligence analyst, also working with Kevin on Impact Edge. I've been with Blackbaud for about 5 years, first working on the social impact side for data intelligence for a couple of years. And I'm now over in the corporate impact side for the last year and a half or so. So looking forward to today.
All right. We are really glad to be here, but we would love if you, as we mentioned earlier, or Jean mentioned earlier, please introduce yourself if you could. Not only would we love your name, but if you have a favorite use case of AI for your personal use, that could be a fun way to start off your introduction. And before we get into that, we have a couple of polls. We'd love to kind of get a sense of where everyone is in their AI journey as they AI adopt. So there's a couple here. The first one is how would you describe your use of AI in your day-to-day CSR or social impact work? And then we have a second one here of how would you rate your organization's maturity in adopting AI? And just kind of recognizing that sometimes there's a distinction between what we're doing as professionals versus what maybe our organization is doing as well. So I think this poll will be open for a few more seconds as we look. Right. Let's go. So interesting results here. We have about 45% majority looks like interested in AI, but haven't done much with it yet. And no one hasn't used it at all. So there's definitely that's a good news. And then a small minority is using it regularly. So that's pretty on trend with what we've seen in a lot of these webinars so far to date. And then looking at the organization, looks like a lot of organizations are piloting AI tools, but still figuring out how to embed it in CSR strategy and workflows. So really interesting. So let's go ahead and dive in. We're basically going to cover a little bit of the AI landscape just for the last couple of years, because the last couple of years has been a long time in the AI world. Then we'll get into some opportunities that we think that are in the AI space and dive into those specifically for the CSR space. And then we have a little bit of show and tell, some practical dialoguing tips and tricks, and share some tools as well that we might find interesting. I always like to leave these things with like a couple practical takeaways that you can go do right away. So let's dive into the AI landscape. First, we use this term AI for social good, AI for social impact quite a bit, but sometimes it's used without a lot of definition. And I think it's helpful to break it down into these three components. The first one being AI as a solution. And this is kind of where I would say this is where AI is being directly applied to address social challenges. So this could be like AI models to predict natural disasters, AI models to help with like identify human trafficking patterns, and so forth. Then I would say there's this AI in service to those that are doing good. This is more like enabling and empowering. And this is really about, I think, streamlining perhaps like CSR programs and the work that we're doing in the CSR space. So that's really kind of the focus of our effort and our discussion here today. And then both of these need responsible and ethical AI, of course. You have to have fairness, transparency, and accountability in all these cases to have really responsible AI. I think it's helpful also to point out another dimension as we think about AI, and we'll touch on both of these, both in terms of how your organization is approaching AI and adopting AI, and then how you as an individual are adopting and using AI both. Because I think you could be working at different paces, perhaps, in that journey. All right, let's start by just saying the obvious. AI is moving at lightning speed, right? Since the launch of GPT 3.5, just in late 2022, feels like forever ago, right? The pace has been absolutely staggering. If you're feeling overwhelmed, you're not alone. Most people are. We're all drinking through the fire hose right now of trying to get up to speed on AI. And that's really because if you see this diagram, we're really living through an inflection point, a technological inflection point that we probably haven't seen much in our lifetimes. And so I think it's just important to point that out. Like if we're feeling that way, it's because there's actually a reason for that. I think it's really fast, it's complex, it's reshaping both work and it's reshaping both our personal lives as well. So if you feel behind, and some of us feel behind, and I think if we look at that poll, it's probably a good chance that a lot of us feel behind in that case. One, it's even early adopters in this are still learning this in real time. Everyone's still trying to learn, and there's still time to catch up. And I think as we see in the CSR world, many people are just beginning to explore how AI fits. So part of that is just to give us license to recognize that in this space, we can be learners and we can be growing with this technology. A couple of quotes that I think are helpful here. You might have seen these. These are pretty popular. But the future of AI is not about replacing humans. It's about augmenting human capabilities. And we'll see that a lot here as we kind of go into the dialoguing. It's even just changed recently. And then AI will not replace humans, but those who use AI will replace those who don't. And I think that's the important message here is it's really important to begin to use it, to understand it, and to make it part of our professional lives. I think this is helpful just to kind of level set. AI has been, part of the hype cycle. We throw around a lot of terms of what AI means, and it's helpful to understand it in the context of the different types of AI. So on our left here, we have what would be traditional AI. This is the stuff that predates generative AI and ChatGPT, and has been around for decades here. Facial recognition, classification patterns, recommendation things. These are the things we've been using in our day-to-day lives for quite a bit of time. And I think that's still a lot of opportunity there and still a really important aspect of AI. Then you have our generative AI, which is what we've all been seeing explode into our lives recently with content creation and GPT models and natural language processing. And this is a hugely valuable area. Both of these areas are really kind of focused on performing specific tasks and inserting into very specific things. Even though sometimes the chat doesn't feel like that, it's still relatively very specific. Then you have kind of this area of like still theoretical research and aspirational, which is artificial general intelligence and artificial superintelligence. And sometimes our language in this space is actually kind of coming out of that. And some of our fears are also coming out of that as well. But that's still relatively research and theoretical. I think it's helpful just to kind of break down these four categories. So as you're thinking of AI and upskilling in AI, you can understand where you're coming from. All
So
right,
the
let's get,
other way that, sorry, I was just gonna jump right
yeah.
in. I think the other way that we really want to think about this is the top trends in the past year. So these are the four trends that we really think everybody should be paying attention to, and that's agents, tools to teammates, multimodal, and contextualized intelligence. So I'm guessing a lot of people by now have heard about agents, but agentic AI is the idea of moving from our static tools where we're chatting and brainstorming into systems that can actually take the initiatives, plan the steps, and act completely autonomously towards a goal. So there might be things like the one that I would suggest everybody do a quick Google and look at Google's like Project Mariner, where you can say, here's my recipes and shop for whatever I still need on this list. And it will go through, it'll add the app of Instacart, it'll order those things, and it will actually take action. So I think there's some really good examples on there to take a look at. But you can imagine in the future, the ideas of we have a goal of maybe increasing health equity in low income communities by 3% in the next 3 years, measured by XYZ. Maybe prospective grantees are put right on your plate that will help you reach those goals. Employees are matched to the right programs. Campaigns are launched at the right time. Charities are engaged with the right tools. Employees are engaged with those right tools and giving to really kind of compete with the attention economy and surface these things right to your plate to reach those goals. And so I think, moving forward, we could end up in a place where we're less about interacting with user interfaces where we're all going to a particular program or site to do something, but potentially engaging with tools right where we are and telling them to act. I think, of course, there's a lot of concerns for adoption there. I think that the technology is probably a little bit ahead of us in terms of what we feel comfortable with doing, but I think it's definitely something that we want to be paying attention to. And you'll also see in some of those Google Project Mariner agents, all of the outlines so that it's telling you exactly what it's doing as it's going along. And I think that's something we're going to see a lot of. The next is tools to teammate. I think a lot of us are in a place where we're, opening up OpenAI's ChatGPT or Claude, we're adding new prompts, we're getting our responses, we're closing it out and doing whatever we were going to do in a transactional relationship. Moving forward, I think we're going to see a lot more of relationship building. So people are building custom GPTs around specific tasks and continuously modifying them to optimize them. You're creating your own agents that are really good at doing exactly what you need them to do. Or you're creating maybe projects in Claude where you're continuously giving it context about what you want to do and also continuing to iterate. So it's kind of taking that context and building it, and it becomes much more of a relationship partner rather than a transactional partner. I actually don't use Google a lot, but I think for the AI tools, but I would also take a look at Google Veo when we think about multimodal opportunities here. So multimodal, we're talking about maybe the ability to, imagine being able to upload a community engagement video around a volunteer campaign and automatically generate a social media post, generate different languages that explain that video all at once. So that is taking away from kind of these different types of source systems around like generating particular types of content and combining it all into one. And then my favorite, quite possibly what will appear the most boring on this slide, but I think it's one of the most important, is that contextualized intelligence. So one of the big changes that came out in the last 6 months to years, model context protocol. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later, but that has been such a huge missing piece. You have all of your work, your Google Drives, your emails, your Word documents in one location and your data in one location. And then you have these different chat interfaces and LLM tools in another location, and they cannot understand your business context. They can't understand your goals. They can't understand your data. And that has all changed in the last 6 months. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that later too.
Right, thank you. Let's go ahead and move on to opportunities in AI for CSR. And really, at Blackbaud, and Leslie and I in this space have been really thinking about these 6 areas in CSR that are really ripe for AI investment. And I think these really help kind of frame the conversation. And I think it's really kind of important to acknowledge that the really most powerful AI opportunities in this space are really going to start with problems and pain points, not necessarily with the technology itself. But in each of these, we have basically these 6, and these aren't new. These won't be groundbreaking necessarily, but I think they help give it a category or organize our thinking around AI. So the first one, obviously, is efficiency and productivity. Obviously, one of the most immediate benefits in AI will be that productivity we're gaining, especially with CSR, where a lot of us have, very thin teams or are resource constrained in this space. This is a huge opportunity to take some of those repetitive tasks off our plate, and then do more with that, more impact building, more relationship building, and so forth. A lot of opportunity in storytelling, where this can where it can get really interesting. Imagine being able to pull in data and quotes and visuals, really to tell a compelling impact story in minutes instead of days. Um, and then, redefining impact measurement. And I think this is one that this is near and dear to our hearts as we spend our days in impact measurement and understanding impact measurement. But it's really is traditional metrics are often kind of missed, but we can go beyond numbers, as we're analyzing things like feedback and social media sentiment. And all that's qualitative data is going to really be able to be analyzed at scale with AI and provide more meaningful understanding of what's working and what's not. Leslie, you want to comment on any of these or?
No, I think so. I'll do so in the coming slides.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And then I think a couple things here too, more strategic CSR programs. AI is going to really help us be more strategic in our CSR programs, both by analyzing trends, identifying gaps, surfacing emerging needs, can really kind of guide the program to be a more aligned with the company's values and then also long-term goals. And we're really excited about that alignment that has potential. And related to that is really understanding nonprofits at scale. If you can sift through thousands of organizations and look for nonprofit partners and that more align with your mission or have more mission alignment, financial health, and understand their past performance, you can choose a better fit of where that investment might actually be. And then, of course, employee engagement, whether it's helping you design volunteer or giving campaigns and so forth. One of the ways I like to look at this is cross-referencing those opportunities with what AI is really good at. So I put a common use cases. You can also think this as AI capabilities. So automation, ideation, summarization, analyze data, and content creation. So this is a kind of a tool or a framework to think about. If you take those in the right here and look at this matrix, take those things that AI is really good at and think about cross-referencing those against those opportunities in the CSR space. You can start to understand where these might overlap, right? And this is where you get some really interesting intersections. So this is not just kind of a theoretical exercise, but it's kind of a practical tool where you can use this to help brainstorm what are the possible, most useful things AI can do in your organization. So take, for example, this blue dot where you have the overlap of employee engagement with ideation. And this is like somebody looking at the comments. Some of you are already doing this. So you can just zoom into this one capability and this one opportunity and brainstorm and ideate within that one space. So how could we use Gen AI to come up with new ideas for volunteering programs? And I'm sure a lot of you are doing that. That would be one example of brainstorming in that space. Whoops, our slides are going. We lost our slides. Let's go back. So you're kind of brainstorming in that space. So this is just an exercise. If you narrow that scope to one opportunity and one capability, it becomes easier to generate specific, actionable ideas and kind of think about how you can invest in your AI. And if you were to repeat this across the matrix, then you can build a really comprehensive and tailored roadmap for your AI adoption within your CSR space. So I think that was just a kind of a good tool to kind of help think about how do I segment our AI investments and start to come up with a prioritization plan. All right, let's say he's going to dive into some specific use cases as an example.
Yeah, so some of these use cases span each one of those things like, summary. So in this case, we know that CSR professionals are managing maybe 200 plus grant applications per quarter, manually distilling which opportunities are most aligned with the business and likely to succeed. Sorry, not success, but likely to succeed. And so imagine taking all of those manual efforts and kind of gathering sentiment from all of that text to come up with decisions, as opposed to, if you want to click, Kevin, AI doing an automated screening for alignment to goals. So imagine being able to put in your specific goals that you have for kind of business aligned CSR goals. It can access the nonprofit program data and impact metrics to understand historic context about maybe what that nonprofit has done previously, so that we know if we're starting from scratch with a new type of partnership, or if they have maybe success metrics that we can point to in terms of feeling more secure about that grant. In addition, being able to access financial data to assess risk and basically rank and summarize grants for review. Now, I highlighted for review because I'm not necessarily suggesting that it's going to say, this is who you should fund. Like, clearly that is not what we want to be doing. The human element is still going to be so important here in that final decision making. And that's why I think it really highlights some of that ability to summarize and maybe rank. But when it comes to the judgment, which is one of the key things that is separating our current AI technology to some of that like artificial general intelligence, What humans really bring is just judgment that is very hard to get purely extracted from the data. So just wanted to point out that I highlighted for review. So, right, it's saving you a lot of time, but of course I wouldn't recommend that it just makes the decisions for you. Next one is thinking about lack of alignment between corporate strategies and employee participation dilutes the value of programs to communicating impact. Now, this is something we see often, and it's something that I always struggle with in terms of, this balance between really ensuring that we're engaging employees, but also trying to do so in ways that companies can leverage in their CSR goals that are really, aligned with business outcomes, have some sort of mission alignment. And so we are often working in a case in Impact Edge where we see this all the time, where 5,000 employees are giving to 400 or 500 nonprofits or more. And it is very hard to get a story out of that. And so you can go ahead and click, Kevin. Imagine a system where you can proactively see the employees that are engaging in particular like business aligned cause areas. So maybe AI notices an employee donated to a disaster relief 3 times and volunteered at a food bank and can automatically suggest that the company's new hunger initiative during the next payroll campaign. So it can take it from a much more reactive systems to being able to identify employees that maybe are most likely to be mission aligned and how they're oriented for volunteering, for giving, and for taking a more proactive opportunity to include them in things that, might make them more as your impact champions, and basically proactively identify those impact champions and align them to opportunities such as a payroll campaign or a volunteer event. Employees do not associate their volunteering with engagement and positive sentiment towards their employer. So maybe they're going out and they are volunteering a few hours here and there on their own. But imagine an opportunity where the employer can then focus on skills-based volunteering to create leadership opportunities where AI can connect your software engineers specifically to the nonprofits needing website support, your HR team with organizations asking for board governance. So leveraging data, and this comes back to something Kevin was talking about in terms of leveraging nonprofit data at scale to create these potential matchmaking opportunities that can really kind of focus more on skills-based volunteering. I've heard that in multiple webinars, both with this group as well as before, of just the importance of really starting to think more about skills-based volunteering. So that's something we've been thinking about and being able to leverage nonprofit data at scale. And then haphazard communications with employees is ineffective engaging them in campaign giving. We know this is tough. Often we have disconnected systems. And so imagine AI discovers employee giving increases 30% when campaign emails are sent on Tuesday mornings versus Thursday afternoons, and can automatically optimize that message timing. And also, this is something even before AI that I've been talking about with nonprofits, is personalization at scale. So when I was working in the nonprofit side, just a simple question of what inspired you to donate today, and collecting that piece of information from their donor base of like, maybe it was a very specific, and I don't mean like the tool, but like the actual, like what part of that nonprofit program inspired them to donate, and how can we then leverage that piece of data to communicate with them in ways that will keep them engaged. So I think there's a big opportunity to do that with the employee base too. And that was, imagine before we could just matchmake between 10 different messages and the data we collect. Now we can do that in infinite possibilities in the way an employee, like we can see the data in terms of their historic giving history, volunteering, their skills, their habits of how they're using the platform, and engage with them and meet them where they are. Now, one thing I want to highlight with all of these is data. Everything I talked about takes data. and it takes data in a unified system. So if we want to go ahead and click here, you're just going to see all these things like that I found. All right, we need employee giving history, employee volunteer history, campaigns. Each one of these I highlighted, and we can kind of click through here of all the different pieces of data that we need. And I feel like that's probably really daunting. And it is. And so I think that that is something that we've really been focused on lately. And so if we go to the next slide here, I just wanted to highlight because of, so when I mentioned model context protocol earlier, this is the idea of like one of the equivalents is a USB-C. Like finally the iPhone, everything else we're using, the chargers are out now all using a common port. And so this is an opportunity when we think about all of that different data that I'm talking about to feed through essentially what becomes a single USB-C plug. So this is how we imagine connecting this growing list of integrations, of which maybe Blackbaud data will be one of them, but just one of them, with an opportunity to maybe bring in a lot of that other employee engagement data to eventually kind of plug and play with lots of these different opportunities. And so our investment, if we want to go to the next slide here, we have put a lot of investment in thinking about this data lately. So Impact Edge for us was our first opportunity to make sure that we were really getting your grants data, the volunteer data, the giving data, all speaking the same language. And what we're also doing now is investing in candid data, as well as a big partnership with True Impact. And so when we talk about leveraging nonprofit data at scale, those are the two partners we see in being able to do so. So imagine right now we have maybe employees going in, logging. The only story we can tell is that our employees logged 200,000 hours. When we imagine a future system in which employees can actually maybe select programs, and we know the impact of those programs, we know the full history of those programs with the nonprofits, leveraging the data. And also this is for grants. So a grantee being able to pick the program so that we're really connecting the data from the grants, employee giving, and employee volunteering side with that nonprofit side to create more cohesive stories. And so we've moved from a place where we're really focused on just the outcome metrics here to what you can see now with Copilot is just a quick summary of what we all did with the food bank in Charleston, Low Country Food Bank, where it can summarize each of the different activities, whether it was employees that were working on the board, preparing senior bags, a big team volunteer event that everybody did together. And so being able to marry that data with the events, with the nonprofit data to create much more robust storytelling. I think we always talk about storytelling, but the reality is that that is what makes people create actions, right? Like numbers are helpful. Numbers are really important for goals. And I think when we have an ideal story that we can, I think it's important to come up with, like, what are our goals and what does the ideal story look like for our CSR program so that we can then think about what is required in terms of maybe metric-based things to get there, but that we start to think about what is that ideal story. And then we can kind of start thinking about all of the different data that's required to get to that story. And we're getting closer and closer every day.
Right. Thank you, Leslie. Have you got more here?
Oh yeah, and this is just one more thing was saying that, that is the summaries. And I think I kind of just hit on that is that we're getting to a place of what does this story really mean and what is required in that story to speak to the stakeholders in ways that are important for the business, are important for CSR programs, and really show the value. So.
All right, let's go ahead and shift gears a little bit to some just practical discussions of dialoguing using tools in your day-to-day life. And we'll get into it. And we touched on this a couple times, whether it's, from tool to teammate or the changing nature of AI and dialoguing with AI. And so these are just some points on using AI as a thought partner. And this is the mindset I think more advanced users are bringing to AI tools. That's just changed in the last 6 to 9 months, as opposed to going into ChatGPT or something in a Copilot and putting in one dialogue and one prompt and trying to have this, perfect prompt. These tips I think help you kind of in your professional life and personal life if you use Copilot or ChatGPT for that or other tools. So just hit on these augmentation, not automation. Really, AI is about enhancing your thinking, your creativity. It's your collaborator. It's helping you ideate, explore, iterate. I think that's a really important aspect of how to integrate it into your professional life. Embrace the jagged frontier. This is a term that's been thrown around in the AI podcast world a little bit. Really about like this is an interesting time. There's tons of tools. Things are changing rapidly. Feeling behind is going to be normal. I think that's just going to be the status quo for a while as we kind of learn these things. But don't allow that to give you fear to not do stuff. So actively try new things and stay in the stream of knowledge. Follow podcasts, follow blogs, ask ChatGPT to update you on what's going on in the world of AI. You can use AI for that reason. Start with ambiguity. You don't have to have a lot of clear ideas yet to go into one of these tools. You can allow it to help evolve your thinking. So if you don't have the certain jargon you're looking for, if you're not quite sure how to frame something, this is a great tool for that to just and ask it that saying, hey, I'm trying to do this. I don't quite understand this. And it will really help you as you go through that. Just problem first framing, try to come to a tool with what problem are we solving. Use AI to AI. This is kind of a meta skill that, ask AI how to leverage its capabilities, how to write a better prompt. And so you're interacting with AI. You can try different models, try going to Copilot for the answer, then go to ChatGPT, then go to, a different one, Perplexity or Claude to get to compare different answers. And obviously, when I suggest a tool, you would have to, comply with your organization's AI policies on what tools you're allowed to use. And then Leslie touched on this a little bit about human in the loop, but I think it's important to really embrace humanity and that unwired intelligence. Uh, you still make time for deep focus, intuition, and reflection, because it can be really easy to just cognitively offload a lot of your tasks. And I don't think that's going to be a helpful use of AI. So it's important to define and determine what ideas really matter, and then keep using your own judgment in AI. You have that human in the loop, have that review, part of your mindset that you're going to take the output and really reflect on it. But so hopefully these tools help us create more space for deep focus and intuition. And then dialogue, go back and forth, ask a question, exhaust the chat window a little bit. If you can get to the end of it where it basically says, you have to start a new chat. That's not a bad sign that's a good sign that you're really engaging in dialogue. Turning these from kind of a mindset to a skill. These are a couple of things I think that are helpful as you're learning to use AI as a thought partner. One is challenger. Ask AI to challenge your thinking and point out blind spots. If you've used it, you've noticed that these models can be overly complimentary and kind of really a cheerleader. And that's not always helpful because you leave thinking you're the smartest person in the world because it's complimenting you so much. But you can change it. You can ask it to challenge your thinking, be critical, don't overly compliment you. So that's kind of helpful. You can also use it to role play. Use AI to prepare for those difficult conversations or presentations. Ask it to play a counterpart in your organization or your boss, or vice versa. You can play your boss and the thing, it could play you. So those are helpful ways, I think, to really use it. I kind of mentioned this in a little bit, but like think out loud, use AI to externalize your fuzzy thinking. And then templates and seeds, I think, are really important. So I think it's helpful to maintain a library of prompts tailored to what you commonly do. So if you find yourself going and using very common things, just to have a document where you can copy and paste that or upload that. And so you're not reinventing it all over and having to type all over again. And then also some tools like Claude has projects, Perplexity has spaces, the ChatGPT Plus has a way to save documents. So you can really preload a lot of your information there, not personal information, but kind of the information relevant to how you want to use it into that. Use multiple models, as I kind of mentioned. Don't get stuck just on one, but I think it's helpful to try out different ones, or take the output of one and put it into the input of another to see how it responds and critiques that. A fun exercise. And then I would say many tools allow for audio inputs. I find this really helpful. Instead of having to type a bunch of stuff, I just record a narrative. You could do this, on your car or on your phone, and then have ChatGPT or the model make sense of that, and that's super helpful workflow tool. We've seen a lot of these prompting frameworks. This is just another one I like because it really kind of calls out, instead of just prompting, that you're interviewing AI or you're asking it to dialogue with you. So I think that's a helpful addition to these kind of common 4-point prompt frameworks. And then just a few practical tools. I love to take these things to take away. These are just a few, just to maybe screenshot or take a look at it. Go play with some of these if you can, if you're allowed to in your organization. And I've kind of aligned them here. Zapier is an agent management tool. Claude's a great model tool. And I wanted to highlight just a couple of them here. Google Notebook LM by Google is really an interesting tool if you're able to use it in your work or personal life. It's really kind of a research notebook for deep thinking and collaboration. So you can upload YouTube videos, documents, website links, and it will summarize all those for you. And then you can have a conversation about that content. What's nice is it limits the responses to only the things you're uploading. So you're really only asking questions about those things. And it will synthesize and distill a lot of this information. So if you have that list that you put on your your browser, and you're like, this is my list I'm going to read at the end of the week or at the end of the month, and you never get to it, you can put them in here. It'll summarize them for you. And it will also create an audio summary if you want. So if you would rather have it just create an audio summary for your drive home, that's super a cool tool. Another one is Perplexity. This has been in the news a lot lately because Apple is thinking of buying Perplexity, so it's been all in the news. This functions kind of similar to a ChatGPT or a Copilot, but it's really gives you a little bit more deeper research, and it always gives you the citations right here on the top, and limits itself to really reputable sources. So if you're looking for a longer primer on something or a little bit more deep research, it gives you a little bit of longer format than just a conversation. It's really great for knowledge work, for getting primers on a subject matter. In addition, they're adding shopping and travel and academic options as well. But maybe deep research on a particular charity or cause area, really, really helpful. So those are just a little takeaways, just so you have something to go play with in after the conference. And we just can open it up to any questions or comments.
So this last chance, participants, please put in your questions in the Q&A or in the chat. But in the meantime, I have a question. One thing I do hear from some of our members is, my company is very cautious and has restrictions and how we can use AI. Do you have any recommendation for those folks?
I would just recommend engaging it on your personal life. Like if if you have another computer and start using it in any way you can. So if you're locked down and can't use certain tools at work, try to find a way to use those tools on your own device and your own computer. And you could do anything. You can plan vacations with it. You can, plan your meal schedules. I've planned my kids' summer reading schedule. So there's so many ways to use it that are outside of work.
I think it's also a good idea, right? Like we've been doing that a ton. We're on lockdown. Everything has to go through a security review process for every use case that we have of AI. I think, there is a side that it is really important to be cautious as well while learning. So like cautious
Mhm.
at work, But I totally agree with Kevin, like creating your own projects and your own initiative to do that personally while work catches up, I think is imperative, because we can't wait for most of these companies probably to like, and I think that, you know, there's so much changing. It is really hard for companies to figure out that the angle. I think that that's going to start becoming a little bit more standardized. We're already starting to see that, but yeah, I think the buy-in from leadership, like there really does need to be an element of buy-in from leadership. We have some customers that have gone all in though and partner with OpenAI for custom GPTs across their entire organization. And so, you know, I think maybe the opportunity to connect with those types of, you know, it's not really a competitive space, fortunately, that we work in here at CSR. And so being able to connect and identify kind of how those leaders were able to do that and implement at scale, I think is a super important conversation that could be had across all partners here.
Also an important conversation that people can have on the ACB online community in terms of like sharing the ways you're using it and how you're convincing leadership to use it more. One last question. You mentioned earlier on in the presentation about 6 areas ripe for AI, which I found really interesting. And I was wondering if maybe you could just provide a couple more details with some examples of how some of your clients are using it in those areas.
Let's see, you want to take that?
Yeah. So let me go back and think about some of these. One, we did a presentation a couple weeks ago when we were thinking about more strategic CSR programs. And I thought what she said was interesting in that it wasn't as much like, I'm kind of focused on how do we get employees and grants kind of aligned towards business outcomes, but she kind of took it the other way of like, how can I use these tools to take what we have and frame them so they're more business aligned? So it wasn't that like we're trying to manipulate the system, which, you know, I still see a lot of opportunity to kind of create these funnels, but there's also ways of like things that you wouldn't have thought of in terms of maybe the way that employees are engaging in communities and being able to communicate. Like, yeah, you're really focused on health equity, but maybe you didn't think that some of these organizations have like kind of tangential relationships to something that can be related in that storytelling towards health equity. And that partner on our last webinar was talking about that quite a bit. I do see, I think the storytelling to me is just like, I feel that very few stakeholders, like, of course, when we're talking about employee engagement numbers, that's a number. But even then, like humans just don't take action on numbers as much. Like, of course, in business, but like
the data and the story and the heart.
Yeah, it's just, and we need it. And like, we're so close, I think, to being able to really get that, which to me is such a game changer for the CSR space to really be able to communicate business outcomes. So I think that that's a huge one. And the way I've been thinking about it, as I kind of mentioned, is like the example we showed was just for event descriptions. It was employees saying, this is what I did for volunteering. But then we're also going to have all of this program data that we're investing in with nonprofits, so that the idea is if a nonprofit program says, like, imagine maybe a Big Brother, Big Sisters mentoring program where they have, say, 80 students that they're mentoring for college applications. And with those 80 students, maybe each one of them gets, say, 40 hours of mentoring and an 85% success rate of getting them into college. And we know that Mary, our volunteer, volunteered maybe for 30 of those hours. We can kind of do the math to get at what Mary's impact was in helping students access post-secondary education. And so that's kind of the way we're doing it, is leveraging, okay, what was Mary's activity? What did she do with this nonprofit? How can we pair it with the actual programs of the nonprofits and the metrics that they have with those programs? at scale to create these kind of more impactful stories that get both to the impact measurement as well as that kind of storytelling, what is required to get people to take action on brand reputation, on whatever it is that we've really decided is the most value of the CSR program.
So there's actually one last question in the chat if we have 2 minutes. And what are your thoughts about Copilot for CSR work? It's the AI tool that that person is particularly able to use. It's not one that you mentioned.
Yeah, we use Copilot all the time. That's one of the ones that we're approved for and use. I think it works just as well. It has a little bit of different formatting than some of the other tools. I think it's a pretty good tool. You can upload data to it and spreadsheets and have it, work on that. It's a pretty good conversational tool. It behaves a little bit more like ChatGPT than like a Perplexity or deeper research tool, but I think it can. I would say if that's what you have, start with that because it's definitely good enough, and it's gonna get you into those habits of dialoguing with AI.
Yeah, and they're investing in kind of the enterprise level tools that come with a lot of the data protections and the policies that I think are enabling big enterprise organizations to go with Microsoft Copilot. And so I think that they're going to be a little bit slower in things. And that's why, like private life, it's really nice to go in with some of these tools that are like full speed ahead, probably at the expense of who knows what out there when you think about OpenAI and some of the other ones. So like, obviously you don't want to give all of your, I wouldn't want to give all of our data to some of these ones that are moving at levels that make it a little bit complex to understand like where data is moving. So I think it's a perfectly good tool to use at work, but I would also make sure we're exploring the others to get the full understanding of what capabilities could be or will be.
Great. Well, with that, I would like to thank Kevin and Leslie and Blackbaud for your insights today, for everyone for joining us. And before you log off, there is a QR code on the screen that it takes you to a very, very short survey, which will take you less than a minute to fill out. And we would like to hear your feedback on the session. So please take that. And I hope to see all of you at a future ACCP event. With that, I hope you all have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.